From the flight deck of the astral plane, this is your Captain Starpilot33 checking in with flight log number 5. I'm not even sure where to begin with this one. I just got back after sleeping it off for 9 hours, and if I was going to even summarize what has happened last night, I would say I got completely wrecked, mowed like a lawn, and schooled thoroughly in several dimensions and across space and time. I knew I was in for a rough night with my entity guide, the same guide as last time. Said that tonight I would, quote, shit the bed in every dimension. And I said, literally? And he said, maybe. But let's back up and start at the beginning. Though I was told there are no beginnings and endings, but that comes later. I originally intended a trip last week on a nice rainy night on a 3-day weekend when it actually made sense. However, the whole day prior and the day of the trip, the ambient energy just felt wrong, both around me and inside me. I got a clear sign that this was a scrubbed launch when I looked up and saw the number 66 in front of me. 66 or 666 for me is a signal to take a step backwards and take care of myself. So I did. I try to go into these trips with as much preparation as possible, getting my mind and my setting in the right place, because I know that even with perfect preparation, sometimes the plan for the night is to completely jump the tracks and go off-roading in a psychedelic locomotive or get a galactic ass-kicking that's actually for your own evolution. This past week was a lot calmer in my head, and as the launch date approached, I felt very much at peace, and the vibe was totally different from last week. Yesterday, I was calm with a numb, buzzing feeling all day, almost like that feeling that you get after a trip, only I hadn't tripped yet. I was curious to see how that would affect the trip, since normally I show up on the other side like an ambulance screaming into the driveway of a hospital and begging anyone on the other side to help please come fix me, or whatever mess that I've created this time. But with a few hours to go, I felt fine, and I did my usual ritual of saging the house and stating my intentions, which were to learn, to heal, and to get some answers about some things and hopefully fly some spaceships. The dose was 4.3 grams of finely ground PE mushrooms from my stash that was grown in 2013, and I'd begun to wonder, especially after that last trip with the fresher turbo-powered super shrooms from my friend and fellow space cadet, whether my batch had lost any potency over the years. I've kept them in a vacuum-sealed bag in the freezer with no chance of any light or moisture getting to them. Last night was confirmation that, in fact, there is zero loss of potency at all. I thought that last trip was the most intense one I ever had, which was the upgrade trip where the entities showed up and basically reinstalled the software of my consciousness, but last night's adventure knocked that one out of the park. I had the shrooms very finely ground, so I knew they were going to hit fast, and they did. Choked it down with some orange juice around 6:30 p.m., got comfy on the couch, and waited for the launch. I had a clue that this might be a little more intense than usual when my blanket started breathing and morphing. I looked at the ceiling and thought, God bless whoever invented popcorn ceilings. I could feel it hitting hard and a tingling pressure in my face and my sinuses and my jaw. Even my teeth felt tingly, like it was traveling through every capillary of my body. The body load was immense, like almost debilitating when it finally hit. I could barely move, let alone walk. Co-pilot Cat was late, again, so I launched solo while waiting for him to show up. As soon as I closed my eyes to meditate on the come-up, things started happening quickly. Normally I dip in and out for a while before diving under, but this time I was gone right away, through tunnels and tubes of candy-striped oscillating colors and morphing sounds. Nothing sounded like anything recognizable. It was a complete breakdown of all auditory senses. Sometimes I hear shroom noises, but I also hear the air conditioning turn on or the neighbors slamming their car door. But this time, all sounds from Earth were gone and replaced with the sounds of this other plane of existence. And yes, there were spaceships, and I was so happy to see them. I wish I could accurately describe how amazingly beautiful and intricate the machinery is. Once again, I was standing beside this enormous structure made of these black, interlocking mechanical scales that could morph and change as needed, and between the scales were glowing lights outlining the millions of sections in pink, orange, blue, and purple light that had a neon-like glow. I remember sensing the entity of these ships, that they're alive and require a lot of care, as I've learned on past trips. This time, there was someone with me. Not sure who, but who was explaining to me that these long, large pieces that I was looking at were, quote, something like a thermocouple, he said, and that they needed attention. Literally, like they needed attention like a pet in order to function well. I knew from past trips that the machine elves are very proud of their ships, and care for them much like a child or a pet, and giving them not just maintenance but also love and attention. And while they appear to be incredible fractal engines of morphing light and sound, able to bend time and space inside out and connect with your mind, they also need love and attention. They've said it on just about every trip, but love is the most important thing there is. Not romantic love or loving ice cream love, like deep love for one another across space and time, dimensions and existence. It's the love that I feel from my guides and entities on these trips, especially the same one that's been there the last several trips. I'm getting the feeling he's kind of assigned to me on these adventures or something. So then we went flying. I remember on the past trip they installed some kind of tubes or wires into my right arm that were like a plug-in for future trips that would allow me to connect to the ships better instead of just being along for the ride, and I could actually fly them the same way the entities do. I got close to the one that I was going to fly, and I looked right at its amazing skin full of these circuit-like energy conduits, and it reached out and plugged into my face, and I could feel its energy like flowing through every blood vessel in my jaw as it climbed upward toward my eyes. And then when it got to my brain, I was seeing through the ship, and it was seeing through me. Basically, we were like one entity at that point, and away we went. My guide was back with me for some of this part, and we flew away to faraway places. Planets where civilizations lived, and they were human-like. They reminded me of indigenous ancient cultures from Earth. One planet was lit by starlight so brightly at night that you didn't even need a day. It was bright enough to see clearly, and that's when I met all these other travelers. And they said they'd been traveling this way for thousands and thousands of years, and some of them were actually from Earth. That's right. Those were actually some ancient people from Earth from thousands of years ago that were tripping, because time doesn't exist. There were other visitors there from other planets too, and they all seemed to be meeting up in this peaceful place, like a cool desert at night with just enough starlight to see everything, even things in the distance. And that's when I remembered that time is just our way of organizing things here, but elsewhere, there's no reason why you can't visit travelers from Earth on other planets who lived thousands of years ago. To them, you are the future, whatever that is, and they are the past, yours anyway, but both of you believe that you are your own present, and the fact is, everyone's incorrect. So what? Who gives a shit, said my guide. I arrived back on the Earth plane on my couch suddenly, and I realized I'd been out for almost an hour. It was dark out, and the thunderstorm that was brewing when I pulled under the surface had long since vanished, and I had no idea if it came and went because I wasn't home for any of it, technically. At this point, I started to get really hot. Like my internal core temperature again felt like I was about to start stellar nuclear fusion and enter the main sequence right there on my couch. I felt like I had a hot furnace inside of me, and my hands were so hot it was like they were in an oven. Even this morning, they're still prickling from the heat. So I was lucid and wide awake on the couch, looking at the lamp and the mirror in the corner with the green light from my surge protector shining on the ceiling. It was my guide again, same one as last time, who prefaced my upgrade trip by saying I was very, very loved and that what was about to follow that night was for my benefit, so no matter what happened, to remember that. So the guide said, "How are you feeling?" he asked. I said, "Oh, I'm okay, been kind of crappy lately though. How about you? How are you doing?" "I'm fine," he said. I said, "Don't you have any problems and stuff over there?" I asked. He said, "Not like the shit you have." I laughed. I like this guy. I don't know who he is or what he is, but this energy is friendly. I said, "You're the same one as before that was here, right?" He said, "Yep, that was me." I said, "How do I know that? I mean, I can't see you, but I can hear your voice, and it sounds just like it did before, and I can sense you're familiar, but I have no real reference, so how am I able to recognize you then?" And he said, "By resonance. Everything has a resonance, and it's unique like your fingerprint. It's how I recognize you, too. I recognize your residence as you, and you recognize my residence as me. And that's how we know each other outside of the physical realm." I heard this deep humming sound that seemed to be coming from everywhere, and it was somewhere outside. It was a deep sound, like a deep frequency, like Om, that could be actually felt. And he said, "This is the resonance of the earth that you're hearing. It's the sound that it makes, and it's its unique signature, and this is how we recognize it." This is where it started to get confusing. I was asking about resonance versus vibration. Apparently these are different. Vibration can change, and it has something to do with the color or frequency of what you're radiating, and that can change with mood or thoughts. And when we talk about raising your vibration, it's more to do with the energy that you're radiating contained in the frequency. Your resonance, however, does not change. It's you. It's the sound you make, or the imprint of you, that is how you are recognized. And your vibration is more like how you're doing at any given point. I hope I understood that right. If I didn't, I'm sure they'll make me repeat that lesson in the future. Anyway, it seems like my guide has been prefacing my trips with short introductory visits and some encouragement. He said, I'm so hard on myself and I need to stop it. He said, I need to realize how beautiful I am and the crap of this world is just that you, me, and everyone are just here for a very short time, but this is not all there is, and we can't allow this place to destroy our sanity. Which leads me to the next part of the trip. It was only 9:30. Somehow, I felt like I'd been traveling for ages, and I was tired, like I'd just walked Epcot or Disney World, but I knew the peak was probably still ahead of me. Co-pilot Cat finally showed up and immediately understood what was up. He spent some time with me on the couch and then jumped down, and at some point I realized I needed to get to the bedroom, and that seemed like a monumental task. Walking was nearly impossible. Standing up straight was nearly impossible. Once again, I managed to forget to take my contacts out before tripping, and so that was fun, not only trying to see them, but get them out of my eyes, which were the size of moons, by the way. I made it to the bed. Thank God, I could barely walk, and that's when things started to fracture and accelerate. The first part of the trip was very linear and story-like as expected, but like the last trip, things really dove off the deep end when it was time to go lie down. First, I couldn't believe it was only 9:45. I had a long way to go. And at that point, I would have been fine if the trip ended there. But no, Starpilot, you ate a lot of mushrooms, and there's a price to pay for that, and you know you asked for it. Yes, I did, and I got what I asked for. I was told right off the bat that this was going to be very hard for me, but that it was necessary. Specifically, I was told that I would, quote, shit the bed in all dimensions. And like I said before, I asked if that was meant literally, and he said, maybe. Right after that, it was like Sesame Street invaded the room, and there was a chaos of cartoon images, faces, tunnels, and tubes, and things like that looked exactly like the SpongeBob-style trippy art that you see with all the bright colors. I should have known that's when things were going to go down the dimensional toilet when it went to Sesame Street. You know, that show that's been on for kids since the 1970s. Well, it was like a late 70s, early 80s Sesame Street animation. And after watching a few today, those are incredibly trippy. They told me that babies have the ability to trip all the time, and when they're sleeping, they're really on the other side, and animals do this too. They said that kids have a limited ability, and it fades as they get older. They showed me images from my childhood that were like psychedelic signs that I didn't recognize at the time. Houses with windows that looked like a face, a strange transformer on a telephone pole that had gill-like fins like a spaceship, finding giant mushrooms in the woods, and many of the other things I remember that caught my attention as a child that were really entities looking back at me from the other side. They showed me all these things. I said, yeah, that's so familiar. I remember that. Like, what was that? And they said, now I'm remembering what I forgot when I was born. The entities in the other side feel so familiar and like home because I really have been there before. I think it's the energy collective where all of us come from and to where all of us will someday return. And since we're talking about childhood in Sesame Street, this trip was brought to you by the letters W, T, and especially the letter F. And as a warning, I'll be using the F word here frequently, and for all those who might be offended, because it's just what was said. I could water it down, but then it wouldn't be accurate. So I was told that this dimension that we call home is unbelievably and extraordinarily fucked up. Now, I knew that our universe was, quote, broken by design, and that the perfection is in the imperfection, but there's more to it than that. It's purposely and continually fucked up, and in fact, I quote, we pay teams of people to continually fuck up your dimension beyond all recognition. But why, I ask? Because the lead engineer wants it that way. It's the way it's supposed to work. I said, well, I want to talk to your lead engineer then. They said, anytime there's order or stagnation in your dimension, we continually agitate it. It must be fucked with all the time to keep it moving and growing. If it stops and is serene and tranquil, all the things that you would think are good, it actually falls apart. Keeping it stirred is what keeps it going and keeps it evolving. Evolution is painful. It's not an easy experience because it's a constant transition from one thing to another. Yours is not an evolution from A to B and then stops. Yours is an evolution from A to infinity, and it must be continually fucked with from every angle to keep this evolution propagating. So you seriously pay teams of people, like what are they, interdimensional coders and gamers who multi-roll on let's fuck up this dimension? And he said, kind of. It's not really a game. It's more like gardening. It keeps the soil aerated, but on a continual basis. Like a cement truck, then? I said. Yes, kind of like that. Constantly turning and mixing it up. Gotcha. Okay, well that explains some of the random chaos. And he said, yes, you've been experiencing quite a bit of that in the last few months, haven't you? Yeah, I sure have. Remember, anytime there's stagnation or lack of movement, it needs to be stirred up to keep growing and evolving. And I said, well, I really don't see how the events of the past month are for my evolution or growth at all, or for anyone else's. It was a big bucket of suck, with everything that could possibly go wrong, all going wrong at the same time. And he said, it's what we pay them to do. Nothing's a punishment, it just keeps things moving. I noticed as I was lying there that whenever I rolled over or moved, I got strong waves of nausea. I hadn't eaten since 10 a.m. when I had some toast, so I'd fasted most of the day. I drank a lot of water throughout the trip, and at one point I just really had to go to the bathroom. Everything was fine until a wave hit me that I couldn't surf. I puked. It was water for the most part, but it felt like I was puking things my ancestors ate along with things that I ate next year. It was an interdimensional puke across time and space, vomiting galaxies and dark matter like a quasar barfing plasma energy jets. I felt like I was on an ayahuasca trip. Not that I've done that, but I know people who have. And in fact, my guide said, you can have ayahuasca experiences on mushrooms, and this was one method. I crawled back into bed, not even believing that just happened. But I didn't have long to think about it, because that's when the engine driving this trip really started to spool up, and from that point on, it was like going through a never-ending psychedelic wood chipper. I've had plenty of trips where time and space aren't happening right now, but I've never had one where I was completely unable to access one thought or one connection to my life, my reality, or my sanity before. I could not compose one single coherent thought for most of the time. My head was swimming with nonsense like Snarfblatt, Hammerberry, Pineapple Bus, and when I was able to gasp for air and put two words together that made any sense, the only thing I could cling to was fractured reality. Reality, sanity, and existence were shattered like a mirror. Nothing looked, sounded, or computed like anything familiar anymore, and I was helpless to do a damn thing about it. Don't worry about trying to remember any of this, he said. You didn't exist for most of it. I was still trying to comprehend what I was seeing and feeling to report it back to you guys, but I had no ability to grasp onto anything. There was a phase where I was so far gone, I was beyond a realization of being dead. I was not on Earth in my body at all, and all the memories of this time and place and were somewhere at the bottom of a filing cabinet far away somewhere, and I realized I really did it this time. I died while tripping, but I was unable to even summon any thoughts to care about that or worry about it like I did before. There was no linear, logical progression to any of it. It was like being submerged in a vortex, and there was no way out, and all concept of spatial orientation was gone, and I was just being hurled around at the mercy of whatever psychedelic washing machine my consciousness was in. At some point I woke up from all that and turned on my phone. It was 10:30. All of that happened in an hour. I have several friends who knew I was blasting off that night, and of course they were all wondering how it was going. I turned my phone off because I knew the theme for this night was apparently getting run over by the Great Space Coaster, and I didn't want to give them any reason to school me even harder by twiddling on my phone. I had several more of these completely gone phases, which are not only really hard to describe, but also really hard to remember, even after getting up and trying to write all this down immediately. There was no storyline to it. It was just getting thoroughly wrecked by the mushrooms, but at no point did I feel like this was a punishment or because of some mistake or disrespect on my part. I did get the feeling that the upgrade from the last trip was allowing me to experience this kind of trip in a beneficial way, whereas if this happened before, it might have really fried whatever version of consciousness software I was running previously. If you survive this trip, my guide said at one point, you'll be a lot further along than before. If I survive? Seriously? I woke up and turned the lights on for a bit, searching for something on my night table. Now, this is the third trip in a row where this has happened, and if this has happened to any of you, please let me know. Okay, so my bed is brand new and the sheets are clean and all that, and for the last 3 trips, at some point, I started feeling sand in the bed, like little hard rocks or grains or something. Now, the night before the trip, I remembered this, and I remembered to run my hands all along the sheets and feel for anything. There's nothing there. Then during the trip, I'm sweeping little piles of sand and dirt to a point where I can brush them off the bed and hear the grains hit the wall. How is this sand getting into the bed? I asked aloud, and threw the sheets back, just like I did the last 2 times, and gathered a small pile of debris together. It was like grains of dirt and dark pieces of rock. I said, is this like dirt from some other dimension or something? Like, why does this happen every time I trip? Am I bringing stuff with me? I didn't get a full explanation, but my guide said, like, yeah, something like that. As far as entities go, other than my guide, there was only one other that I ran into, and he said he was God, but immediately I knew he wasn't God because I met God twice before, and there's a resonance that you can't mistake. This was an imposter, but not an evil one, just like a wannabe poser, and I called him out. I said, I see what you're doing. It's pretty obvious that you're just an impersonator. I told him that he's harming himself more than he realizes by doing this, and that while he might get some people to fall for it and get a rush off of feeling like God for a bit, that actually he's deceiving himself more than anyone else. I could sense he was a little embarrassed. I didn't boot him out like bad spirits that sometimes come around. He wasn't bad. It was like somebody impersonating a celebrity, not to do damage, but just because they wanted the adoration and attention the celebrity gets. It seems entities have egos also. So Co-Pilot Cat came in and was with me on the bed for a while, and I started thinking about my kitty named Bingo, who mysteriously disappeared in March. He was my best buddy, and after nursing him back to health after his surgery, I had a special bond with him. I feared he may have gotten curious and jumped in someone's car or something, because he never wanders off. At one point, I was told that he was dead and not to think about what happened, but that he was okay now. But later in the trip, I felt like that might not be the case, and he might be still alive somewhere. Either way, he visited me in the spirit world, and Co-Pilot Cat was the medium. I called for Bingo and felt him come into the room, and while I was snuggling with Co-Pilot Cat, I could feel Bingo's resonance like my guide said earlier. I could feel it was Bingo radiating through Co-Pilot Cat, and I told him I loved him very much and I miss him, and he told me that he loves me too and misses me and that he's okay. And then he was gone and Co-Pilot Cat was back. I'm so happy that Co-Pilot Cat was really willing to be a channel for me to talk to Bingo. He really knows what's going on with these trips. He takes his job very seriously. He was even guarding the house after I let him out after 5 a.m. There was a little black cat that got into my backyard, probably drawn to whatever energy vortex was coming out of my roof. And the Co-Pilot Cat screamed at him and chased him down the street. And I bolted out of bed to see what was going on and saw the end of the encounter happening in the driveway. And then Co-Pilot Cat came back inside and had some food and went to bed, and I slept another 5 hours. There was no obvious come down from this trip where it's fading and I'm saying goodbye and I love you to everyone. As it was fading, they were still telling me to practice meditating. Immediately, I was back with the spaceships again and seeing jewels of light peeling themselves away with images of ascended masters and machine elves as they said, "This is the deep wisdom." And then there was Buddha sitting there meditating, and I was told that the highest state of enlightenment is also the pinnacle of not giving a fuck about anything. Not life, death, existence, nothing. So I said to my guide, so Buddha basically achieved the highest state of not giving a fuck? Yes, he said. I said, that's it? He said, yes, but it's totally contrary to your design. You're wired to be concerned about things, and too many things, and it gets out of control to the point where you're making yourself sick. The learning is in the discipline of banishing all those concerns and condensing it all down to one thing left, your own being. Once you let that go, you've essentially mastered the art of unbecoming, and at that point, you couldn't give a fuck if you wanted to because there's no you anymore. You're such an awesome teacher, I said. He told me to come down slowly and just rest. I'd been through a lot. My sheets were soaked with sweat, and the pillow, and my hair. I found a dry spot somewhere on the bed and drifted off, and the last thing I remember around 2:30 a.m. was, with my eyes open, seeing the beautiful inner machinery working behind this plane of existence, like what's backstage at a theater. I woke up at 11 a.m., ripped all the sheets off the bed to wash them, cleaned up the mess in the bathroom, which really wasn't as bad as it felt at the time. I got up and had some breakfast, nearly passed out, had to go lie down for a bit, got back up and started working on typing the script. I considered just talking into the microphone like before, but due to the way this trip jumped all over the place, I knew that I'd probably miss some important things if I talked without a script. I've had a lot of trips with loss of ego, loss of time, space, death, being in multiple dimensions at the same time and all that, but I've never been in such a psychedelic blender before. I remember somebody saying to me, "This is a bad trip," and I said, "There are no bad trips." And they said, "You're learning." I felt like apologizing at the end, and I felt like I'd failed in some way on this one, like I was unable to get it together, but they said not to be sorry, that I did just fine, and that this was more challenging than any trip I'd had to date, but it had to happen at some point, and with the upgrade that it would be much easier to process this afterward. So what do I make of all this? I don't know. I'm going to be unpacking this one like a container ship for a while. There's a lot of things to figure out. It was rough, that's for sure, but I got through it, and I'm okay, and I feel fine, just a bit wiped out. And as crazy as it was, nothing that happened will cause me to not go back again when the time's right in a few months. I walked outside to break up the cat fight and the stars were out. Orion and Leo were in the sky, and I looked up and said, I'd do it again. I look forward to hearing from you in emails and comments. If you want to email, check the video description, and you'll find me at starpilot33@protonmail.com and also starpilot33 on Instagram. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you on the other side.